Welcome, everyone. This is the regular meeting, monthly meeting of the King County Regional Homeless Authority. I now call this implementation board to order. We will conduct this meeting over Zoom. Just for your information, this meeting will be recorded. All chat, all verbal and nonverbal will be recorded for public record. The board members will be asked to share comment. Please raise your hand and click the bottom right-hand part of your screen. This will put you into a queue that Carrie would call you by order of your hands being raised. At this time, I'd like Carrie to call the roll. Or is it going to be Maria? I can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I can go ahead and call roll. Give me just a second. Okay. Oh, Lordy. I don't have the annotated agenda to call roll. I'm so sorry. I wasn't prepared for this. Let me go ahead and get that list. All right. Damian Patnod.
Here.
Gordon McHenry.
Present.
Thank you. Harold Odom.
Here.
Here. John Chalmanek.
Here.
Michael Ramos.
Here.
Nate Caminos.
Here.
Pastor Kerry Anderson told me that he will be unable to meet today. Paula Carvalho.
Here.
Sarah Rankin.
Here.
Simha Reddy.
Here.
And Lamont Green.
Here.
Did I catch everyone? I think that's everyone. Okay, great.
And
There we go.
we have a quorum.
Yes, we do.
Before we go into the next section, I'll just like do some housekeeping. Carrie is one of the 4 staff members who have not left us to go on to the regular duties. So thank you, Carrie, for staying with us and training people. Maria will be our new staff person, and as she's learning, we might come to some hiccups, but please be patient with us. These 2 ladies are working excellent and doing a great job in keeping us informed, and having Nate and I and Mark and well informed and at the ready for everything. So I've asked people to do land acknowledgement, and just so it doesn't get stale, and that we're authentic and we represent what we're saying as truth. I've asked Lamont Green to do this month's land acknowledgement.
So I'm going to share my screen in 1 second here. I can be extremely low tech. So let me try to share my screen and not have you all disappear. Okay. All right, so let me share this here. Can you all see my screen? I can't see you all now for some reason.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So Juanita Spotted Elk shared this video, and she wanted me to share it with you all. And she's not able to be here with us today. She's having some family emergencies and some things that she's attending to. And so I'm sharing this in honor of Juanita Spotted Elk. And I just want to also share that this video may be triggering for some. And so I just want to give that content warning as well. And also that it's so important, as Harold stresses, for us to move beyond just kind of a land and labor acknowledgement, to really being involved. And so I also wanted to share this link with Real Rent Duwamish. You can go to realrentduwamish.org, and you're actually able to contribute to the Duwamish tribe. And you can give anything from $1 to whatever amount you want and actually pay rent and contribute that way. So that's realrentduwamish.org. And also the Duwamish tribe isn't federally recognized. And so you can go to the federal recognition petition at change.org and also support the federal recognition of the Duwamish people. And so now we will watch this video.
My name is Rebecca Larson, and I'm a proud member of the Quinault and Quileute Indian Nation. I am a foster parent. I am a parent. I'm a grandparent. I'm a member of a beautiful community, the Swinomish, that is not my nation, but has become my home. There are elders here at Swinomish that I have sat with, and we've had this conversation about when, in the past, if a strange sedan pulled up on the reservation, our mothers hid our children. The scoop was the term that we use because the Children's Administration and other agencies were allowed to come into our tribal communities and literally scoop as many children as they could, take them quickly, far from our reservations, and place them for adoption. The practice didn't really stop until the early 80s. So this is not some far away romantic idea of, oh, that was so long ago. My mother, Karen, was taken during that era from my grandmother, Myrtle. My grandmother, she had to go into the hospital for surgery. And while she was in the hospital, my mom and her siblings were taken. They separated them immediately and put them in separate cars. And my mother could remember driving away from the car that contained her sister and her brother. The Superior Court judge signed off on the paperwork within a matter of 4 days and said that my grandmother was morally unfit to raise her children. There was no explanation given. After her children were taken, some things never healed in her. She left the reservation. She was murdered on the streets of Tacoma. She was 38. My mother, Karen, went to live with this family. It was a very abusive home. She found herself pregnant with me at a very young age and was sent away. They still had Catholic-run schools for unwed girls. She was forced to sign papers to give me up for adoption, and she ran away from that place and never went home. She carried that brokenness with her out onto the streets, which is where she lived. She was unseen and unheard and never allowed to come home because of those systems that were in place to keep us from our communities. I was taken at birth and placed in a foster home, and I can remember the day my social worker came to collect me and take me to meet my prospective parents. I was not quite 4. I remember meeting these strange people, non-native folks. They oohed and awed over me, and in less than a week, my things were packed. It was the 70s, and there was no ICWA in place to protect me. My adoptive mother was very abusive to me physically. My adoptive father, he was very abusive to my mother. My going to 18 different schools was so that my father couldn't be found out. We moved to protect his abusive behavior. Moving to Swinomish was a moment of grace to be connected to a tribal community and to people who I understood inherently. What really saved me in that situation was being able to talk to the youth director, and I shared with him the things that were going on behind closed doors in my home. And he and his family, they just took me into the fold of their family because that's what we do as Indian people. We are tied to our culture in a way that I think is very different from other communities. You don't grow up with just your nuclear family, your immediate parents and your immediate siblings. In tribal communities, we grow up together in large extended families. Most adoptees who are not covered by ICWA and who are adopted out into non-tribal homes are not afforded that. That unsettled feeling, they don't even know what that is. It wasn't until I became connected to a tribal community that I understood. It had to do with my disconnection to our people. I think that my life would have been very different if ICWA had been available or in existence at the time of my forced adoption, being taken from my mother, and certainly would have changed my mother's life during the Scoop era if it had been in place at that time to protect her, that she would have been placed with a family within our extended family. She would have stayed connected to our culture and to our people. For me, coming full circle, wanting to become licensed as a foster home is to keep our children connected to their communities so that they don't feel that strange, where am I? Who am I? Where do I come from? I didn't become a licensed foster parent in hopes to fast track adopt children. I have 2 boys in my care right now, little boys who are lost in the system. There are people longing for them to come home. When I tuck them in at night, we pray for their mom and we pray that she can do the things that she needs to do. Because as a foster parent, your goal should always be reunification. The assault on our communities against our children, it continues today. When our children are lost, they languish in care. The disproportionality of the numbers of our children who are in extended care, who do not return home, are horrific and wrong. And ICWA is in place to protect us from that. Sometimes people say that the issue is too complex. And when I hear that word, I think about my mother dying. I think about my grandmother being murdered. I think about my great-grandparents. And I think about our ancestors that have prayed for us as children and as great-grandchildren and as far down as they could think ahead. What ICWA brings to our communities is the hope that our children are going to be connected to us and not lost to us forever.
Thank you all for listening and watching to that. And I know it's really difficult, but I think it's something that we need to ground in. And our sister Juanita Spotted Elk wanted me to share too. You know, she's fighting the child welfare system in Montana to get her kids back. And when she shared with me this video, you know, I've heard about the Indian boarding schools of the 40s and 50s. But this was happening in the 80s in America, where child welfare were coming onto native reservations and scooping up these kids. And this happened in Canada up until the 90s. So this wasn't that long ago. And when we look at homelessness and we look at the enormous disproportionality with our Indigenous folks. And so just wanted to ground us in a recognition that we do have to move beyond this labor acknowledgement to an action and solidarity around our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And we have a lot of local organizations, Chief Seattle Club, the Seattle Indian Health Board, you know, United Indian of All Tribes Foundation, La Patia, and others. And regarding our labor acknowledgement, this month is Pride Month. And so we also want to honor our LGBTQ folks and their unacknowledged labor and fight for their civil rights and economic rights. And we also want to acknowledge the high number of LGBTQ youth, the violence against trans women of color, and also the discrimination that LGBTQ workers face in the workplace. So we just wanted to bring forth those land and labor acknowledgement today, and thank you all.
Thank you, Lamont. Thank you very much. It's very powerful indeed. So we'll have 2 minutes of public comment. And it says 2:15, but we're running a little late. So if you'd like to provide verbal comment, please place your name and the city that you're calling from in the chat. We also have written comment. And to do so, just place your name into the chat and write into your public comment into that. The chat and to put yourself in the queue starts now, and we'll open up when we open up public comment. I can't give you a time right now. So thank you. Nate?
Thank you, fellow co-chair Oldham. Let's move on to the consent agenda portion today, and then
Before you do that, Nate, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in. I chatted Harold, but he might not have seen it in his chat. I do want to acknowledge that Adrian Quinn has arrived for the role, and as we move into voting. Sorry.
Great, thank you so much, Carrie. And we'll do public comment after we conclude the consent agenda portion of today's meeting. So moving on to our consent agenda, we are seeking board approval for just the draft minutes in your board packet from the May 12th regular meeting. If there's any discussion, is there a motion to approve the May 12th meeting minutes?
So moved.
Okay.
Seconded.
All right, a motion and a second. Thank you. All in favor to approve, please vote by saying aye.
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 Any say nay? Any abstentions? Okay, the minutes are approved. And I know that we had gone kind of quickly from instructions for public comment to approval of the minutes in the consent agenda to public comment. So I'll allow a little bit of grace here as folks that may be tuning in from the public to type into the chat or to flag that they'd like to provide public comments. But we will now begin, have 10 minutes of public comment. If you do wish to comment and have not yet typed your name and city in the chat box, please do so now. Each individual will be given 2 minutes to comment and will be unmuted and called on in the order that their names were entered into the chat. When you reach the end of your 2 minutes, we will ask you to finish your comments so that others may speak as well. So I will now, it is 2:21 at my clock, and so I will at least open public comment for the next 10 minutes until 2:31. Public comment is now open. Carrie, do we have anybody in the chat who's in the queue?
We actually have 3 people who've raised their hands. So we have Tamara Bauman first, Naomi C. second, and then Bill Kirlin Hackett. So give me just a second, Tamara. Oh, looks like. Give me just a second. Tamara, you may unmute yourself to speak.
Yes, that's me. I am so sorry. Again, I made a mistake and hit the wrong button. So please disregard.
Okay, no worries. We'll just move on. Okay, so next we have Naomi C. Give me just 1 moment. You may unmute yourself and speak. You have 2 minutes.
Hey all, hope you're doing well. My name is Naomi C, speaking as an individual. Thanks for making space today for comment. I just wanted to quickly address one provision in the authority's proposed policies for the procurement of goods and services. Under the section non-federal funding, funder-directed sole source procurement, funders are allowed to direct the authority to contract with a specific subrecipient agency through sole source procurement. Acknowledging that I may not fully understand this provision, my initial understanding is that it may limit or fragment the scope of the regional authority as local funders' selection process may deviate from the goals and approach of the authority. I can potentially see how this provision could be used by funders in a way that leads to a less coordinated overall response and perpetuates inequities and gaps in the current system, specifically in terms of who is funded to provide services. So while I absolutely see the value of local funder input on who is best equipped to serve local needs, I believe this could be better accomplished by integrating these considerations into the authority's procurement process. One precedent is the proposal offered by the Health Through Housing program, which includes local stakeholders in selecting providers as part of that process to operate acquired buildings. So thank you for your consideration.
Can I take a brief point of privilege to say that, Naomi, you are so smart, and it's great to hear your voice again, and we will take that under advisement. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Thank you, Mark. Carrie, our next speaker.
Yes. Next, we have Bill Kirlin Hackett. Bill, you are free to unmute yourself, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Greetings to all of you today. Thanks for continuing your work. It's midway 2021, just about 2022 looms. The lead on our contract doing vehicle outreach in Seattle is talking to a Seattle council member about what to go, where to go next. This isn't about renewal of what we do at the level that we do it. It's about planning to exponentially increase the current underfunded response for vehicle residency outreach. And so I'm puzzled with who we turn to because it's going to take a radical shift in how it gets done. Seattle council members, the regional authority, the county, which is also talking about this at the county council level. A bit of a fragmented response on the horizon right now, but we're going to fall further behind. As I said, it's midway 2021. This is when such plans have to get started for the exponential increase that we need. It's deteriorating out there. It's very hard to look at and be on the streets and try to help people. Our outreach call this morning through the HOPE team was frustrating for everybody, and that wasn't even including the vehicles. I confess I'm impatient. We want to start talking about the way to lay this out for next year because we are so far behind on vehicles. It is, as I said, painful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. And that is everyone that I see right now signed up. We'll give it just a couple seconds.
Okay, is there anyone else, Carrie? Sure.
I'm not sure if Bill Kirlin Hackett meant to raise his hand again or if because of public comment rules, oh, nope, put it down. Okay, I think that's everyone.
Okay. Well, thank you, Naomi and Bill, for your participation. For anyone who did not have an opportunity to provide comment, would still like to, we will leave the chat window open for the next 10 minutes. And now let's go on to the next portion of today's agenda, which is the CEO's report. We will now hear from CEO Mark Dones with updates and several proposed policies to facilitate the startup needs of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. These are all pretty straightforward policies meant to allow procurement and startup operations to move forward more quickly, ensure that the board refers communications inquiries to KCRHA staff, and comply with the ethics and conflicts of interest requirements. But with that, I'll let Mark speak to it themselves. Go ahead, CEO Dones.
Thank you. Great to be with you all for our monthly. And appreciation to Naomi, as I expressed, and also to Bill, always for helping to sharpen our gaze around vehicle residents. This happened in the chat, but I think only members of the board and staff could see it. I want to have public appreciation for Lamont for bringing that video into the space. On behalf of Juanita, it was powerful, and frankly, I will speak for myself, had information I did not know, and I am grateful for that opportunity to learn about that history and that struggle. And then also thank you for the acknowledgement of pride and what pride is, right? Which is a reaction to some not great stuff. And as a non-binary queer Black person who is fortunate enough to lead this agency, I feel that very deeply. And so I just want to thank you for doing that emotional labor today. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen if I am able, which turns out I am. Wonderful. There you are. Can everyone see my screen? Fantastic. All right, this should be relatively straightforward, with the exception of bringing Naomi's really insightful comment into the conversation around one of our policies and making a decision about how we want to move forward there. So my goals today are to talk about some hiring updates, and then to jump right into the operational policies and discussion and a possible vote. So on hiring, I am delighted to announce that we have hired a sub-regional planning manager and a chief of community impact. Our sub-regional planning manager will be Alexis Rink, who is coming to us from SCA. She has been a policy analyst at SCA for, I believe, about 3 years now, has an MPA, is an organizer, and we are delighted to have her join the team. I always like to sort of give a moment of shine to new staff about sort of the moment where I was like, oh, you're amazing. And Alexis was really talking about wanting to bring an equity analysis to sub-regional work and to really think about like how variation in population and who is impacted is more than just the sort of like macro, but also sort of sits inside the block by block and community by community. And I was like, you're brilliant. Please work here. Please work with me. And so really excited to have her on the team. She will start on the 21st. And she is currently wrapping up her SCA responsibilities. I am also delighted that we were able, frankly, to bring someone over from the SCA team. I think that her strong work and relationship track record will really benefit us as we look to move rapidly into a sub-regional planning process that we all feel good about and that really yields the best results. Additionally, we've hired Anton Wallace as our Chief of Community Impact. Anton actually has already started, but part-time, will begin full-time on July 5th. Anton, so the Community Impact Division will house our most of our planning and policy work and analytics. Anton is a ABD methodologist from CUNY, has 2 master's degrees, is a veteran, and is incredible. And I had the opportunity to work with Antoine at the National Innovation Service. He actually joined that team after we'd completed our work in King County. So while I was wearing that hat, I don't know that any of you would have had an opportunity to meet him. Anton brings a really, really strong rigor to looking at like, how do we know what we say we know? And I'm really excited about that because I think, as we can all attest, oftentimes in the housing and homelessness space, we've all looked at numbers and been like, I don't know that quite adds up. So really excited to have him on the team. Anton also brings a strong racial justice analysis to how he does his work, and so often asks the question of, you know, is the way that we are deriving what we say we know rooted in oppressive frameworks? Is it excluding people? What margins is it creating? And one of the things that Anton has had an opportunity to do over the last year is really rethink the point in time count for the state of New Jersey. And so really excited about him bringing the lessons that he learned there to us as we begin to ramp up towards our point in time count, and think about what that can be for us as a vehicle of better understanding and not just regulatory obligation. In the pipeline, we have a chief administrative officer. I think we're very close to issuing an offer letter there. I'm so happy about that role, y'all. I can't. I truly like I'm just tickled about how soon I'll be able to say, that's not my job about a whole bunch of stuff. But that role will oversee our operations, our finance, the team that will sort of hold those functions will report into that role. Additionally, our CAO is going to be pretty big in our budget development process. And so we're really excited about what this role is going to be able to offer us in terms of capacity from engaging with stakeholders across the region as we look to both develop the budget and then take the budget through the appropriations process. Really jazzed. On Bud's role, we have been working with the Lived Experience Coalition to get draft content on what folks think that role should be. As you may recall, what I said is that I did not feel comfortable asserting that role into a void. It's not a position that has ever existed. And because of its particular responsibilities, I really wanted the LEC to have a role not just in confirming that person, but in crafting the job itself. And so we will be getting some draft language from the LEC shortly, and then we will move to refine and post or recruit. And then deputy CEO. So having some promising conversations, and my hope is to be able to extend an offer there in the next 4-ish weeks. I think and that also begin to sort of round out the chief. And then from there, we'll look to fill some of the senior director roles. We're still missing a senior director for equity and justice. We need a special projects person, some other stuff, a special assistant, a pinch hit. So we'll continue to look to fill some of those senior level positions, but our chief roles will be filled once those 3 are identified. And I'll pause there. Are there any questions or thoughts?
I just wanted to say great hires, Mark, and I can attest to the fact that Alexis is a wonderful and great leader from her time at the Evans School. She really made a lot of change there, and so she's a great addition to the team.
Thanks, Adrienne. Any other thoughts or questions? All right. Then next up are the operational policies. You all received the draft policies in your packets. The policies for your consideration are a startup implementation and operations policy, a code of ethics and conflict of interest policy, I apologize, an implementation board external affairs and communications policy, and a procurement policy. They are all very straightforward. And again, we will consider the complication that Naomi raised, which was smartly raised. But as just a reminder, so the draft implementation and operations policy is very specific to our startup phase. We need to put in place final policies around a number of things, but we also need operational authority to say we're going to buy a thing that we just have to buy, right? Like so before we have full policies guiding everything, I need to be able to say, yes, Peter, you can purchase these computers and not worry, right? That like, oh, am I like in trouble because I don't have the full authority to do that? So that's really the basis there. I added in, and I want to acknowledge, Peter has really driven a lot of the drafting of these, and I'm very grateful for his work in this space. I don't want it to seem like it's a Doan show. In fact, it's very noticeably not a Doan show anymore, and that is just fantastic. So really want to give Peter the shine he deserves. I added a clause to the draft policy that Peter sent that time limited this to 6 months. I wanted to ensure that we were being clear with you and with the public that this wasn't a just like broad, indefinite usurping of the ability to make decisions without board ratified operational procedures. And I felt frankly that like we, with a CAO and like, you know, the additional capacity that we'll be able to put the things in place. in order to have everything stood up within from a policy perspective within a matter of months. So added a time limit to 6 months, and the option obviously for the board to extend it if we brought it back and said, hey, we're going to need more time to do X, Y, or Z, but that's not my expectation. And I'll pause there for any questions about that policy before moving on to the next one. All right, seeing none. The next draft policy in your packet is Code of Ethics and Conflict of Interest. Very straightforward. We can't accept gifts. We just need to make sure that we have a clear ethical structure that is guiding our work. Some of that is pursuant to the ILA, and so wanted to make sure that we had that in place quickly. This policy is in accordance with model policy used by similar agencies. And again, I will pause to see if there are any questions. All right, seeing none, I will continue. The next policy is on board implementation, board external affairs and communications. After some conversation with some of you and with the co-chairs, it became clear that we needed a way to ensure that we were clarifying who was speaking on behalf of the authority. And so this is a policy that you all would adopt to essentially say, when you are reached out to about things having to do with authority day-to-day business, right, that you would refer that to staff for response. And that response would come from me or from Anne as a way of stating what our official position is. I think that, given the complexity of the work that we are doing already, that I think it is broadly in the best interest of all of us that it be very clear who is speaking on behalf of the authority, because that can be interpreted as then policy, and we want to just make sure that we are clarifying the roles there. Again, I will pause for any questions. Michael.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a time to raise a question. I think that the statement you just made about not representing the authority, or that you are the people, you as the lead are the person or persons who speak on behalf of the authority. You've stated it more clearly than it's written, I believe. The advocacy piece about encouraging advocacy on particular issues as individuals rather than as members of the board, I think that's clearly stated. It's also stated just above that board members are not expected to speak on behalf of the authority. I believe that's vague language. I probably should be stated more declaratively. Either we do not speak for the authority except by designation of Mark, the CEO, or we will not be asked to speak at all on behalf of the authority. And it is the CEO and the CEO's delegates who will speak solely on behalf of the authority. Something to that effect. There's more we could discuss there, but I just maybe to clarify it, and I'm certainly congruent with whatever you think is right.
Thank you. That's really helpful feedback. I saw Gordon raised a hand.
Go ahead, Gordon.
Thanks. Appreciate Michael Ramos's input, and I think I saw Sarah Rankin also affirmed. If this is a proposed policy, which I support, and I support Michael's comments, I guess what I'm going to suggest is a practice, so a bit lower level, which is when this happens, it would be great if there was a communication loop so that we who are on the board are aware of when a person has reached out to the board, asked for input, appropriately management of the authority has engaged in the response, but it would be great if there's some sort of process that's not burdensome, where we're informed or aware of that communication. So that's a suggestion from Gordon.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I do think we are trying to have a practice of closed loops broadly, of like nothing goes into a void. So heard, and we can certainly, particularly as we start to have more people, yay, we can certainly commit to ensuring that when outreaches goes to a board member as it is redirected to us, that we ensure that you are either BCC'd or followed up with individually to ensure, right, that you know that a response was issued, that we are in dialogue if need be.
Any other questions?
I just wanted to sort of add, I think for me, the vagueness was around inquiries in terms of the way that the document is written. I wouldn't want anything in here to sort of circumscribe our ability to give in our own personal capacities our views, or to advocate, for certain outcomes, or for certain positions. In other words, I hope that nothing in this document would be read to circumscribe our ability to, or limit our ability to speak about any sort of matters that may or may not involve the homeless authority in our own personal capacity.
Yeah.
So the inquiries that you're talking about in this document are really just inquiries about what is the official position about the homelessness authority, and then we would pass that inquiry back on, as opposed to not being able to speak.
Yeah, that's also a good edit. So
thank you.
The goal of this policy is to be narrowly tailored, right, to apply to authority business and authority positions, right? And all of you, frankly, the reason you're on this board is because you have lots of thoughts, and many of them very smart, about homelessness and housing in our community. And so do not intend to circumscribe your ability to speak freely as individuals, right? But simply to say, like, that would be, Sarah Rankin's opinion as Sarah Rankin. It would not be the authority's position.
Great. Adrian, you had your hand up?
Yes, just a very quick, friendly amendment. I know the intent is there, but it might be helpful to be specific. It says, KCHRA is committed to providing timely, accurate information to partners, customers, collaborators, and the public. And although it talks about media below, perhaps media should be listed in that as well.
Done. Any other edits or thoughts around the comms policy? Okay, so we will, for the purpose of today's vote, to be clear, we will retract this one and edit it and bring it back.
We have Shawmanak. Sean, get your hand up.
I do, and I want to apologize again for not being able to get off mute quick enough. I do want to go back to the one regarding expenditures, but I'll do that since I was slow to get off of mute. I'll do that when we're done with the other ones, but I just wanted to get that in.
Gotcha, John. We'll be sure to come back to you after we go through all of these policies and open it up for the board. Thank you.
So the last is the procurement policy, and I think this is it's the sort of most like, this is a policy we need to set, and I think other than I think the issue that Naomi raised in public comment, it is pretty straightforward as a procurement policy. It follows applicable state law. And is structured in a way, so the nature of the ILA that forms the authority makes us bound to the most stringent state law applicable to either parent jurisdiction. And so this has been walked through to ensure that we are setting ourselves up to be able to follow procurement policies that are in line with whatever the most stringent state law would be. The question that Naomi raised about discretion on private dollars that flow into work that we do, I think is a smart one. I think there is a legal question, and I would actually look at Paula and Gordon and ask your thoughts here, because I think there's a legal question about the ability of funders to designate sort of like who they might identify as who they want to work with. Naomi's point in substance, I think, is a powerful one, right? About like, does that actually incentivize ongoing fragmentation? And so I would actually look to our members of the board who are in more of the funding capacity to offer your thoughts about that particular comment and any guidance you might offer us.
This is Paula. I do not believe, and I might be wrong, I do not think private philanthropy can dictate who you partner with. I think we could write into like a grant, like you might follow a model or you would do A, B, and C, but as far as dictating partnerships, I don't believe we can legally do that. But I might be wrong.
Gordon here, I appreciate what Paula just stated. And I also appreciate the input. I think it is an appropriate concern, and I don't see that being the intent of most funders. I could see objectives, though, high-level objectives, which would be hopefully stated very clearly, and then the authority would need to determine, can they live into those. I would also, of course, hope that in the spirit of a regional approach, that we not behave in a way that that would justify that would bring reality to that concern. So I think I'm really glad that we're having this express conversation now, and I think we should be firm in our behavior, that we are living into and lifting up the strategies and the goals and the tactics of the authority, and not trying to drive our specific agendas.
I see Lamont's hand raised and then Simha.
Thank you. I couldn't find the hand raising button. So my question, and Mark, this isn't directed to you and your team. I know you bring a tremendous expertise in equity, and we'll be centering and embedding that in everything, but really thinking for the long-term institutionalization of all of this, as you said earlier on, how can we design a system and inculcate it against inequity? And so I know early on in some of the community discussions with staff, there was like, talking about having an equity-based decision-making. And so in this kind of procurement policy, how are we embedding equity-based decision-making tools or some type of equity analysis in the procurement?
I can actually speak to that. I think that's an important point. So we are legislatively bound by the ILA to have an equity-based decision-making framework. And so it will actually, it will be separate from our procurement policy and sit above it, if that makes sense. Because I need the equity-based decision-making framework to apply to everything we do, right? And so in terms of like order of hierarchy for policy making, right? Like the EBDM is going to be like our, I don't know, I can't find language that I like. It's going to be our biggest thing. And so I want to be thoughtful about, I have some drafts based on work that we did with the community previously and other things. I want to be thoughtful about re-looking at it and seeing, does it account for everything? Are there concerns? Do we want to run it back through the LEC? I think yes, right? Like before we finalize that. And so that's why it's not with you today.
Great, thank you, Mark.
So, Mark, this is Harold. A report came out today that showed King County and Seattle, even though they have an equity-based form, they still only gave 4% of business to minority-owned and women-led businesses. They have that in place, and I've seen it in other places. And I'm not directing at you, but I hope you see that the importance of it. Not only Lamont's question, but my question: do we have an assured point where it's going to say, at each step, especially in contracting, this is part of your procurement paperwork at each spot, each time, or something like that. I don't want to see a report for 4 years come out and say, but we know already that minorities and women-owned businesses aren't getting the work. It's going to those people who are contracted with the city over and over and over again. And I said it yesterday. We come transforming to do policy, work, everything. And we have faith in you that we're going to do that.
Thanks, Harold. I appreciate the feedback, and I think I think the way that I'm approaching how the equity-based decision-making framework will work operationally, I think that we can see it do different kinds of stuff. But I also think that, like, in candor, I think that this will have to be part of how we do our work collectively to, like, continually lean into a sort of continuous quality improvement framework around how we do equity-based work. I think that's just like, and that's fine, right? Like, I'm not afraid of that. So I think we set ourselves up for success by setting it up above everything else, and then we watch it to see if it's performing the way that we need it to perform.
All right, we have Simha and then Adrian next.
Mostly I just want to clarify the question in my own mind to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So this is within the procurement policy, thinking specifically about the funder-directed sole source procurement issue and trying to determine whether or not we can, and then whether we should, use funder direction as a basis for choosing sole source procurement. Is that right, Mark?
Yeah, the that was raised was essentially like, should you strike that? And there was an alternate model provided by Naomi, and then also I think Gordon and Paula just now said, like, you can also put in, like, language that gestures towards funder objectives as opposed to any kind of funder directed.
Okay. And I guess the other part of my question is for, it sounds like, I don't know how urgent it is to get this policy in place. Like, would it be necessary to just strike that piece now, adopt a procurement policy aside from that section this moment, and then come back with an addendum to it at the next meeting? Just sort of logistically. Yeah.
I am inclined to suggest that, yes. Okay. I think, and thank you for reading my mind. Like, we gotta buy some stuff, and like, I'm like, the stuff we need to buy is not, like, at this point we are not, like, procuring like large service contracts. It's like, I need to set up an IT vendor who can, like, actually build out an IT work environment for an agency, right? Like, we have a little bit of an itty bitty contract right now that is running through the county, but ultimately we need to make sure that we have the capacity to procure startup services at the scale that we're gonna need. So that's what's really, I think, in my mind and in Peter's mind, in bringing this to you today, is that we want to make sure that we have the ability to do that. And so I would suggest for today that we strike that clause and come back with anything that we want to edit in that section, but today just strike. I would say that, for example, for the comms policy, there's a bunch of stuff in there. I think we all agree on the spirit, and so, like, we can table it and bring that back entirely. Like, I'm not, like, as pressed about that one.
Thank you, Mark. I see Adrian, and then we'll have John.
In thinking about Lamont's comment, Harold's comment, and your response, Mark. I know that we all know absolutely that under your leadership, the racial equity standards will be applied. I am thinking about what Lamont said in terms of institutionalizing it. I wonder if we could just add another bullet point or another letter under the procurement standards, and just add that for every procurement, the King County Regional Homeless Authority racial equity standards will be applied, or something like that. And then I would also suggest and perhaps these standards are not the right place for it, but we have a system in place where staff reports back to the implementation board after every procurement, or maybe not every procurement, on a quarterly basis, or whatever you and Peter decide, but more than annually, so that we know who the money is going to. So to Harold's point, we don't find out at the end of the year only 4% of the funds have gone to Black-owned businesses or something like that, or organizations.
Yeah, I think we can definitely amend to add that bullet about following it, like, ensuring that EBDM is followed in procurement process. I want to be thoughtful about, like, is it quarterly, is it biannually, and, like, to my mind, that is a dashboard.
Yeah, I don't know that you need to answer.
Okay.
I'm not asking you to answer that now, Mark. I'm just asking that staff consider the frequency with which you'd report back to us.
Yeah. That makes sense to me, and we can definitely we can definitely amend today to add EBDM. And is it okay if we add a vaguer bullet that's just like, and we'll report to the board on success of?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right, John?
So this is kind of actually where the expenditure authority and the procurement authority kind of come together. So I'll just kind of weigh in here. And Mark, maybe you can explain what is, and part of the reason that I've had trouble with mute is I was trying to be a good person and not print a lot of paper today, but I found out I'm going to need to print it because working off of one screen didn't work. Walk through what the major procurement policy is. Are you going to be following the King County procurement policy? Is this a procurement policy solely for the authority? Or are you going to be?
No,
yeah,
this
go
is
ahead.
our procurement policy. It is solely for the authority.
Okay.
And it matrixes the most. So again, we have to follow the most stringent applicable state law for either parent jurisdiction. And so you have to matrix those things and figure out which is the most stringent, and then put that one in on each level.
Okay, and let me just share my concern, because it kind of goes back to the expenditure authority or the procurement. We had a mayor who came into office a number of years ago who liked Macintosh. Turned out you can't buy Macintosh for the city. I think they were Macs, because there's already a standing contract for buying PCs. So he had to go through PCs. So I'm just wanting to make sure we don't have mistakes like that. The Monorail Authority, which is probably a better example, it's kind of like what this organization is. When it stood up, it had a number of issues related to what money was being expended on that. And to tell you the truth, I am not certain that we need to be the most stringent, have it to the most stringent. It's fine if it is, but I think it needs to be, and you've made the point that you need to find a way to get these things done. And when I worked at King County versus working at Snohomish County, I found that the King County work was just so much more difficult to get something done than it was in Snohomish County. And that didn't mean that we were cutting corners in Snohomish County. It was just far more efficient and far simpler to do the right thing. So those are, I commend you for saying do the most stringent, but that may get in the way of getting service out to people. And
Yeah, I want to be clear. That's not my opinion. That's counsel. Like because of Deanna isn't with us today, but because of the structure of the ILA, we are obligated to operate in that way around procurement. And so it's not if I could just design a procurement process, it would not be you have to follow the hardest laws, right?
Yeah.
That is the legal opinion of our council, and so that's what we're operating inside of. And Peter, I don't know if you want to speak to that anymore. I'm seeing no from Peter. And then on oh no, Peter, you took yourself off mute.
I just wanted to clarify that while the state law requires that the authority inherit the most stringent requirements on each of those entities, it does not mean that we have to adopt the policies that are the most stringent that those entities have adopted. It is the state's requirement of those entities, not the entities' requirements of themselves. So there may be procurement policies or practices that have been adopted by the city or the county that are their own policy that are over and above or beyond what state law would require. I just wanted to clarify that.
And since they are the largest funders of the organization, how do they, and I guess they are sole source in a sense, but how do they meet it? How would they meld into that sole source that we were talking about? Because I'm presuming they're going to want to have some strings attached to this, not down to the point of you must contract with X agency, but they're probably going to want to have some strings.
So the jurisdictions that fund the authority via the ILA, right, will enter into, for the purposes of contract transition and funding transition, master service agreements inside which we will all negotiate what makes sense for us.
Okay.
So that'll be the source of, the county and the city of Seattle, and any other jurisdictions that come in later, having their conversation with the authority about yes, we're coming to the table. Here's what needs to work for us in order for us to feel good about this relationship.
Okay, thank you.
No worries. On the point about the Macintoshes, which I'm not entirely certain that I grasped, but the expenditure authority that we need at this point is not to that scale. So again, I need to be able to ensure that as we staff up, that the budget authority exists for us to say yes, a computer for people as they start, right? I'm not trying to none of us are trying to buy 700 laptops from Dell because feels like a good bulk buy. It really is at the level of those kinds of staff by staff purchases to ensure that folks have the equipment they need to do their work. Similarly, I think we've run into some instances of we need to spend money. We had to get a Zoom account, right? It's a budget approved thing. We didn't break any laws in getting a Zoom account, but if later on we find out, we also need something else, again, in the sort of get work done space, we just want to make sure that we have the capacity to do that.
All right, thank you, John and other board members. I just do want to do a time check. We had maybe ambitiously looked to try and get all of this scheduled and executed within an hour's time, or being respectful of your time. It is 3:07. We're already 7 minutes over here. And I know some board members have commitments to about 3:15 and 3:30. Want to ensure, as well as making sure we have quorum for what is necessary in terms of at least 3 of the 4 policies that we've been able to hear Mark and others speak to so far today. And obviously a lot of great comments, questions, and conversation in the last half hour or so. I want to bring this back to the board for any other additional discussion, but also looking at the conversation, I believe we have a table on the implementation board external affairs communication policy that we can look back to in the July meeting for next month. We do, it sounds like, good to move forward on at least the implementation, the operations policy, and then the code of ethics and conflict of interest, but there might have been some addendums on the procurement policy. So Mark, unless you yourself or other board members have specific items that they would like to present as we look to do this consideration of these policies for this current meeting, look to any of your all guidance on what that might look like before, as I also entertain a motion in that regard.
I would agree with that, Chair. I think that if we can vote on implementation, startup implementation operations, code of ethics, conflict of interest, we can, there are edits to the comms policy, and there were edits to the procurement policy. I think that I would also be comfortable. I think the edits to the procurement policy, there was no contention. So if we want to voice, modify, and vote, I'm also comfortable with that.
John? I see your hand raised. I'm not sure if that was for this or that was from earlier.
I don't have my hand up. I apologize. I may have accidentally put it back up.
All good, John. I just wanted to make sure. Okay, given what Mark just shared, I am open to entertaining a motion.
I move that we adopt all three policies that Nate just mentioned, with the friendly amendment of adding a provision to the procurement policy that all procurements follow the equity-based decision-making process, if that language is okay with Mark.
And that we report to you on some basis how
on a regular basis or something.
Thank you for being the one to take that on, Adrian. I'll let Mark put the bow on it. I hear the motion from Adrian and a second from Lamont. Any discussion? Okay, for this one, let's, as a package of all three policies, let's do roll call on this one. Carrie?
Carrie Anderson is absent. Nate Caminos?
Yay.
Paula Carvalho?
Yay.
John Chalmanek?
Yay.
Gordon McHenry Jr.?
Yes.
Harold Odom?
Yes.
Damian Patnod?
Yay.
Adrian Quinn?
Yes.
Michael Ramos?
Yes.
Sarah Rankin?
Yes.
Simha Reddy?
Yes.
And Juanita Spotted Elk. Or, I'm sorry, Lamont Green for Juanita Spotted Elk.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Therefore, that is unanimous. All are yays with one abstention due to absence. The vote passes.
Great. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Mark, Peter, everyone on the staff team for the authority for your work on that, and the board. Let's move on to my other co-chair, Harold Odom, to open up for the board for any other business.
Is there any other business? I don't think there is. But I would like to say this. I hate you all. No, to all the fathers, may you all have a blessed Father's Day, and, you know, mend those ties that need to be mended, work on that ego, and help our boys be better boys, and respect. I move for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
And we're adjourned.
All in favor?
Thank you all.
Aye. Good. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Happy Father's Day.
Thank you.
Happy
Thanks,
Mother's Day.
everyone.
Great rest of your month. See you next
Thanks,
Tuesday.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.